The Lord is risen. Hallelujah. Good to see everyone that's here this morning as we gather together to worship God and to remember again His Son, the Lord Jesus, dying and rising from the dead. We're going to start this morning by reading Psalm 47, and Kathy's going to come and read that to us.
Clap your hands, all peoples. Shout to God with loud songs of joy. For the Lord, the Most High, is to be feared, a great King over all the earth. He subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. He chose our heritage for us, the pride of Jacob, whom He loves. Selah. God has gone up with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. Sing praises to God, sing praises. Sing praises to our King, sing praises. For God is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with a psalm. God reigns over the nations. God sits on His holy throne. The princes of the peoples gather as the people of the God of Abraham. For the shields of the earth belong to God. He is highly exalted.
Thank you. So we celebrate the resurrection today, but we do this every Sunday. In fact, the reason why Christians worship on Sunday rather than Saturday is because it is in memory of the day Jesus rose. That's why we call this the Lord's Day. But before we get to the resurrection itself, we need to consider this fact that Jesus really died. Jesus really died. And we need to think about this because it's easy to assume this fact, especially if you've been going to church for a long time. You read the Bible, you come to the gospel accounts, and they declare that Jesus died. And we read it and we just take it as a bare fact, or we just read it as another part of the story without actually thinking through the implications of it. Last week we considered the significance of this, that death is the punishment for sin, and in Jesus we have the sinless one dying. In our reading we learned that about the women who witnessed Jesus die. They saw it happen, and when they went to anoint him, they were fully expecting a dead body. Not only that, but Joseph and he gave Jesus a proper burial. And Pilate heard that Jesus had died, and he was surprised. Do you remember that? And it was surprising, because as we learned last week, crucifixion could take days for somebody to die. But it is true that Jesus did die. The centurion who oversaw it confirmed it. And his job would have been on the line if he got it wrong. You see, the Roman Empire was really, really good at killing people. But consider that even before going to the cross, Jesus had been flogged. He had experienced what has been referred to as the half-death. And I say all this because Christians have been accused for some time of making up that Jesus died, for simply taking all of this and making it up. Now, there's actually naturalistic explanations, purely material explanations for what we believe. We just want them to be spiritual. And so Christians have been accused of making up the story of Jesus dying, that he wasn't actually dead and only appeared to be dead. But the Journal of the American Medical Association published an article confirming that Jesus would have been really actually dead, and actually to try and explain it away, to explain his death, to explain it in such a way that he was only appeared to be dead, is actually impossible. He was dead. So let's now consider what this book has been leading up to. First, Jesus really has risen, and second, Jesus really wants us to go and tell people. So first, Jesus really has risen. The singer-songwriter John Mayer wrote a breakup song that perfectly describes the aftermath of a relationship ending. He sings this, he says, "When you're dreaming with a broken heart, the waking up is the hardest part. You roll out of bed and down on your knees, wondering, was she really here? Is she standing in my room? No, she's not, because she's gone, 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 gone." When Jesus had been with his disciples, they were excited for what was coming. Peter had declared that Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah, but it hadn't gone the way that he thought it would. What had begun as a great adventure leading up to what they thought was going to be the start of a revolution had ended in the death of their rabbi, their master, their teacher, the one who had led them to Jerusalem. And so we can only imagine how scared, how heartbroken they would have been on Saturday. Because wounds like that take a long time to heal. We can only imagine what it was like for the women as they made their way to the tomb after the Sabbath. They were carrying spices so that they could anoint Jesus, and it was early. Mark tells us that it was very early, just after dawn, and they wondered about how they were actually going to carry out their plans. They had all these spices and they had carried them all this way out of the city, but there was the problem of the stone. They had seen the stone rolled into place because Mary Magdalene and the other Mary had seen where Jesus was laid. Remember, they were expecting to bring spices for a dead man. And so let's think about what the women witnessed. See, when they arrived, the women witnessed three things. First, the stone is rolled away. Second, an angel. And third, an empty shelf. Mark writes in verse 4 that the stone had been rolled back and that it was very large. The women knew that it was too big for them to roll back. But here, it has been rolled back and there's no one to be seen. And so they go into the tomb and meet their second surprise. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. Now, Mark may be describing a young man wearing white, but the reaction of the women doesn't match up with simply meeting a young man wearing white. They're alarmed, and it's dark in the tomb. Even white cloth looks dull, maybe even gray in the dark. And so there's something about the man's white robe as well. This is no mere man, but a spiritual being. And he points out an empty shelf. You see, the tomb would have been a family tomb. And rather than each person getting their own little hole, there were usually shelves carved into the rock where bodies would be laid to rest. The man points out that the empty shelf where Jesus had been laid, and he points out that it was empty. And so that is what the women witnessed, but we need to think also about what the angel said. He said to them, "Do not be alarmed, you seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen, he is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Some have tried to propose that maybe the women had gone to the wrong tomb, but the fact that they saw where Jesus had been buried means they know where he was buried. And the angel's words help as well. He knows who it is they're looking for, and he tells them where Jesus is. He says, Jesus has risen, or translated literally, has been raised. And so the thing for them to see there in the tomb is that there is nothing to see there in the tomb. Not only that, the angel tells the women to go and tell Peter and the disciples that Jesus has risen and is going to see them in Galilee. And why did the angel tell them that? Because Jesus had told them this would be the case. So we've got what the angel said, but what about what Jesus said? Jesus doesn't speak in this passage. He's nowhere to be seen. Well, when Jesus and his disciples arrived at Bethany to get ready to go into Jerusalem, Jesus told them to go and get a donkey. He told them where to go, what to say, and to bring the donkey back. When they went and did so, it all happened just as Jesus had told them. The donkey's owner let them take it, and Jesus entered Jerusalem as king. And he had a similar exchange with them preparing for the Passover. Just a few days before today's passage, he sent 2 disciples to go and prepare the Passover in a room that would be set aside and furnished for them. It's in chapter 14, verse 16 that we read. The disciples set out and went to the city and found it just as he had told them. Jesus had told them it had come about just as he had told them. But this, he died. Surely that was the end. Except it wasn't. Chapter 8, verse 31, he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. Chapter 9, verse 31, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed after 3 days, he will rise. And then in chapter 10, verse 33, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and will deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him. And after 3 days, he will rise. Now, you might be thinking that this timing doesn't really make sense. In Mark chapter 15, it says that Jesus died sometime around 3 p.m. He was buried later before the evening. And Sunday at dawn is at best 36 hours after that moment, which doesn't sound like 3 days. And you're right, because 36 hours isn't 3 days. Now, there have been attempts at trying to reconcile this and explain how this still means that what Jesus said would happen, happened. And the problem with most of those explanations, including the ones that have charts to try and show how maybe the darkness that covered the land counted as nighttime, but actually no, that happened before he died, and so does that actually work? And they just end up making a big mess, and those explanations ignore the existence of idioms, of common ways of speaking. As an example here, we might say, speak of the devil. In Poland, they have a similar phrase. They say, talk of the wolf. There are different ways of saying the same thing. And in that ancient Jewish context, to say, after 3 days, what that means, that's a colloquialism for the day after tomorrow. It isn't just, and this isn't just another convenient explanation for this. This one is actually presented to us by the ancient Jewish historian Josephus. You can read about it in his Antiquities. And so everything that Jesus had said would happen had happened. And it had happened just as he told them. Jesus really has risen. And it was a real physical resurrection. It really bothers me seeing the Jehovah's Witnesses standing outside with their little stand of tracts advertising their free Bible classes. Because the big problem with what they're teaching is that they are teaching lies about Jesus. Not only do they teach that Jesus wasn't divine, they also teach that he wasn't really raised. They say that it was just a spiritual resurrection. What they teach is wrong, and it's leading people away from the truth. Jesus really has risen, physically. And Jesus really wants us to tell people. That's our second heading. Jesus really wants us to tell people. See, on the night when he was betrayed, Jesus told his disciples that they would all fall away. Judas had already gone to betray him, but the rest would find themselves fleeing rather than enduring. Mark's gospel ends in a way that pushes that point even further. See, while the men hadn't fled for fear, the women flee from the tomb and are struck silent with fear. They couldn't speak. They were trembling. Now, what was the reason for this? They'd been speaking when they went into the tomb, and now on the other side of the tomb, they are speechless. And it's a really odd way to end the story, isn't it? This is how the gospel, according to Mark, comes to a close, with a group of scared women who can't speak. Now, it's safe for us to assume that they were eventually able to speak, because we're all here reading about it now. The message got out, but the message didn't get out because the women made a compelling case. In fact, the woman's testimony at that time wasn't worth anything. And the disciples, when they heard, weren't suddenly able to preach in a compelling way because they worked things out for themselves. No, what has been the message of Mark all along? Humanity is too weak on its own. This message is too powerful. It's hard to believe. It's hard to preach. It's a message which is beyond us, and yet it is what we're told to go and proclaim. The reason why the gospel is so hard for people to accept isn't because people think that Christians are a bunch of backwards-thinking, patriarchy-enforcing, woman-hating bigots. That may be what the culture around us wants us to think is the reason they don't believe. But it's not true. The gospel is so hard to believe because our hearts are fundamentally broken and our ears and eyes are deaf and blind. Because we don't want it to be true. We don't want there to be something wrong with us. And the gospel clearly shows us that there is something wrong with us, or else why did Jesus come? And built into the gospel is the command to go and tell. When war comes to an end, people celebrate. They want to tell people war is over, and the resurrection of Jesus means that the war has turned. What did the angel tell the women? He said, "Go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." That is the Great Commission in Mark's Gospel. That and some other reasons are why we're finishing this up at verse 8. You see, the apostles are still the apostles. You might worry if it's too late for someone. You may have family members. Some of your kids will have grown up maybe in this very church but have since fallen away. Is the gospel still there for them? Peter and the remaining disciples were called by Jesus. They were named and they were given the task of going and preaching, but they had fallen away. They had failed. But Jesus wants the women to go and tell them. Why is that? Because they still have a job to do. Their work had only just begun. And so this should give us great hope. Just because someone's not here does not mean that they are lost forever. However, what did the angel tell the women to do? To go and tell the disciples. Their job was to go and to tell, to bear witness, to declare what they had seen, or in this case, what they had not seen. Jesus had risen just as he said he would. He had told them over and over that he would die, rise, and meet them in Galilee. The only way the good news about Jesus Christ, the risen King, gets to Greenock and to your families is through people going and telling. Don't be content with just having heard it. It doesn't matter if you're a new Christian, or if you've been walking with Jesus long enough to know that you're closer to seeing him face to face than you've ever been. If you are alive right now, and you believe that Jesus is who he said he was, then the command to go and tell still applies. There is no aging out of that calling. Last week at Rooted, we were thinking about the Easter story with a bit of help from Scripture Union. They describe the resurrection as a real game changer. Because the resurrection, it means that death is conquered. Jesus is victorious and he is building his church. And because I'm still fairly new here, there are faces that I don't always recognize. And if you're visiting, I'm glad that you are here. And if you have questions about what I've been saying or want to know more about all of this, I'm happy to chat during tea and coffee. And as Douglas said, we've got some books there for you to take. There are no strings attached to them at all. We're just glad that you're here. And if you did come with somebody, know that they have been following along with Mark as well, and so they might have some answers for you too. and it's Easter. There are people in churches who won't be back until Christmas. But we have to consider this. If the story of Jesus is compelling enough for you to make the trek here at Easter and Christmas, what might be the consequence of his words being true? Why give up a Sunday morning, whether it's raining or sunny, to sit in an old building if there's no chance this is true? Jesus really did die. He really was raised, and he really is the Son of God. Amen.